The Greeting Agreement, Part 2, by Morgan Olson. Chapter 3, The Rational Refuge. University sounded like air conditioning and fluorescent hum. People there didn't raise voices, they calibrated them. Every opinion came with citations, every confession with an apology for lack of objectivity. It was a paradise for someone who wanted to stop feeling, and Mara settled into it gratefully, the way you settle into a room where no one expects anything from you. She studied linguistics because it looked like neutral territory. Numbers and sound, reason and rhythm. Language had rules. Rules could hold. Her classmates called her the tuner. If a seminar grew heated, she could repeat someone's sentence back in a tone that cooled it instantly. They thought it was a skill. To her, it was containment, catching the gremlin whisper before it hardened into a fight she'd have to witness. His name was Daniel. He taught poetry, guest lectured in her graduate seminar, and spent 20 minutes arguing that meter existed because the human heartbeat needed a container. Mara sat in the back row and watched the gremlin on his shoulder lean toward her with an expression she hadn't seen in years. Curiosity. They were together for 2 years. He sang off-key on purpose while cooking to make her argue about pitch. He kept a drawer of her things at his apartment before she'd ever asked and never mentioned it. She found it one morning looking for a pen, her spare glasses and a sweater folded next to his socks, and had to sit down on the bed for a minute. He was the first person who made her want to stop taking notes. She mostly didn't stop. Their one recurring fight was about his brother. Daniel and his brother had a rupture years old, money, then silence, and every few months, Daniel would draft a message he never sent. Mara could hear his gremlin the whole time, plain as weather. He misses him. He's waiting for permission. One night she couldn't stand it anymore and told him so. Told him what he was feeling. Precisely, in order, like a diagnosis. Daniel put down his phone. Did I ask? You've been circling it for an hour. Mara, did I ask? He wasn't angry, which was worse. He looked at her the way you look at rain through a window. You do this thing where you skip the part where I get to tell you. You go straight to already knowing, and I end up feeling like a text you finished reading. She wanted to say, but I was right. She could hear his gremlin confirming it even now. She said nothing instead, which she had learned in her parents' house, and the silence sat between them doing its old familiar work. The end, when it came a year later, was quiet and almost courteous. No shouting. 2 people making smaller and smaller bids for connection, each misread by the person who was supposedly an expert in exactly this. You know what's strange? He said, at the door, bags packed. I never doubted that you heard me, not once the whole time. I just needed you to answer what I actually said, not the thing underneath. The thing I chose to say out loud. That was me too. That was the part I was giving you. She stood in the doorway of the apartment for a long time after he left, listening to nothing. The year she finished her postdoc, Grandma died. The funeral was small. Her parents stood on opposite sides of the graveside and did not look at each other. And their gremlins, still gray, still faintly red, thinner now than she'd ever seen them, stood between the two of them like sentinels who had waited decades to be relieved of duty. Afterward, her mother handed her a parcel wrapped in brittle newspaper. Your grandmother wanted you to have this. Her voice was clipped. Her gremlin, behind her, was weeping. Mara took the parcel and said thank you, and neither of them said anything else, because that was the language they had. Inside, a cracked leather book. Across the front in faded ink, the greeting agreement. It was not a book exactly, it was a contract. The main text was set out in articles, like a charter or a covenant, in a formal hand that shimmered when the light caught it. Ink that didn't sit on the page so much as hover just above it. The margins were crowded with her grandmother's looping script, translating the clauses into plain speech. Article 1. To greet is to call another into being. Say hello like you mean it. That's all they ever asked. Article 3. To listen is to hold what is offered without correcting it. Not what you hear underneath, Mara, what is offered. Article 5. The translators shall carry what humans cannot yet say until they can say it. They never meant to carry it forever. We made them. 6 articles. Then a 7th heading, Article 7, above a page that was blank except for one line at the bottom, in fresh ink, in her grandmother's hand. Finish what I couldn't. Mara turned the pages back and forth, looking for instructions, a key, anything. There was nothing else. Just 6 articles of an agreement between people and the creatures who carried their unsaid things, and a 7th article that had never been written, and a dead woman's handwriting asking her to write it. She sat in her childhood bedroom holding the book while the house hummed its familiar hum around her, quieter than she remembered, and she realized with a slow, cold feeling that quieter was not better. The gremlins in the hallway were fading, not resting. Wearing through, exactly as Grandma had said, translators carrying decades of freight down a road with no end written into the contract. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the room. "I was taking notes when I should have been talking to you." The air said nothing back, but the book warmed faintly in her hands, and she chose to count that. Chapter 4. The Static Between Words. By 35, she was Dr. Mara Caldwell, director of the Effective Cognition Lab, consultant to think tanks building empathetic chatbots. The university adored her results, a tidy equation linking vowel length to sincerity, consonant attack to aggression. The press called her the empathy engineer. Privately, at night, she studied the agreement. She had photographed every page and mapped the articles against her own data, and the correspondence was not symbolic. It was structural. Article 1, the greeting, matched the acoustic signature she'd isolated in genuinely warm hellos, a specific openness in the vowel, measurable, teachable, nearly extinct. Article 3 matched the rhythm of real listening, the held pause that modern conversation had optimized away. The contract wasn't mysticism, it was a phonetics of sincerity, drawn up in an age that still practiced it, and every clause the culture abandoned put more weight on the translators. And the translators were failing. She could hear it now everywhere she went. The city's gremlins going threadbare, their whispers shortening, some of them reduced to a single repeated syllable, like a stuck record. Work emails had dropped dear and sincerely. Text threads started mid-sentence. Every omission was a clause quietly breached, and the creatures bound by the old bargain kept carrying the difference, because that was the deal. And no one had ever written the article that would let them set it down. That, she began to understand, was Article 7, the missing clause, the terms of release. She just didn't know what they were. She tried drafting it a dozen times, legal language, poetic language, phonetic notation, and the page rejected everything. Ink faded within hours, like the book was spitting it out. Whatever the 7th article required, it could not be composed. It would have to be earned, and she had no idea what that meant, and there was no one left alive to ask. The university's newest sponsor wanted her research for a dating app algorithm, pairing by linguistic resonance. It felt like taxidermy. She ran the trials anyway, telling herself she'd at least see what they did with her data. 30 volunteer couples, talking about their relationships, while electrodes mapped their speech. Mara sat behind glass with headphones on. The gremlins came through clear as ever. The nervous flutter before I love you, the brittle echo behind it's fine, familiar music. Then one couple, mid-30s, sitting 6 inches apart on the lab sofa, stopped performing for the microphone. The woman turned to the man and said, voice small and unguarded, "I just need to know if you still want to be here." The man was quiet a long moment. His gremlin went very still. Then, "Yes. I'm just scared I'm not enough." The waveform flared, a measurable pulse of light around both their voices, as if the honesty itself had a temperature. And the 2 gremlins above them, threadbare and gray a moment before, brightened, visibly, fed. Mara sat behind the glass, staring, while the instruments recorded a thing she had spent 20 years failing to catch on purpose, produced in 10 seconds by 2 frightened people who loved each other. That was the mechanism. Not release from the contract, renewal of it. The agreement had never needed a seventh article to end the translator's burden. It needed humans to resume performing the first six. Except that wasn't quite it either, and she knew it, because the ink still wouldn't hold. Something was still missing. Something the couple on the sofa had that she, watching from behind glass with headphones on, did not. She pulled off the headphones and sat in the observation booth until the building emptied and did not write anything down.